Danny, real pleasure to have you on. There's a lot of ground I want to cover, right? I find you guys are still one of the best kept secrets in Quebec. Maybe less so. I'm still to hearing Vosker's name more and more these days in the community. Maybe you want to start in the early days. So, what was the original idea? You and your two co-founders. How did you guys come up with Vosker?
That's a great question. And first, thank you for having me on this this episode. It's a pleasure to be there and to have the chance to basically explain what Vosker is and where we're going. So thank you for that. All right. So your question is how well did the idea came from, or where did it came from? And what we've done is that my two co-founder and I had another businesses in the past prior to founding Vosker that was doing what we call wildlife monitoring. So people were using cameras to monitor wildlife animal in the woods for either hunting purposes or just monitoring of certain species, pest control, and those type of things. And at some point, I think in 2016, my brother came up with the idea that we should connect those devices through a cell phone network. Because prior to that, the user was installing its camera in the woods somewhere, and then every weekend or so, he had to go on spot, change the battery pack, remove the SD card, place a new one, and then with it SD card, he was getting back home, inserting it into its computer, and then trying to filter out like, are there any sort of animals that I want to see or track? If I'm a hunter, for example, is there a deer there, or is it a squirrel running around? And he was filtering the 200 pictures, and if he had more than one cameras, which is typically the type, for example, for hunting user, you have 5 to 7 cameras, and sometimes even up to 10 cameras. If you do that every weekend with 10 cameras, then it becomes it's a new job. Like it's really taking a lot of time. And so what we've noticed is that we tried to connect for our own purposes internally for our tech team who had to go in the wood, remove those SD cards very often when we were testing them. We came up with the idea that we should connect them through cellular network. And then once we started to do that, we say, hey, and my partner Jan was like, maybe we should use that for our client base. They potentially would like it. And it's at this point that we started selling cellular connected cameras. And the difference between the SD enabled camera and the cellular camera that are unable to connect through our platform is basically that you don't have to go on site. The camera is going to take picture when there's a motion and it's going to send it to our cloud, which is going to filter then through our AI and everything that we've developed. What is it that you really want to see? And it's going to send it into your cell phone. And at that point, something really cool happened. Prior to that moment, we were selling to like big box retailers, and we didn't know who was the client. We didn't know, for example, that Paul had bought a camera and what Paul was doing with his camera. And at this moment, we started to see what Paul was doing with it. Not only we saw what he was doing with his camera, but we saw that it was not using it for the purposes that we had designed our camera first. So it wasn't for hunting, it wasn't for wildlife monitoring. They were using, for example, in downtown New York. You were seeing the images on the camera of the client that were in New York, and were like, wow, this sounds strange. I don't know what they're hunting there. Uh, and so what we've done is that we, out of that new knowledge, we tried to gather some information, and we did some survey focus group, and we really noticed that like 30 to 35% of our user base at that point, and I'm talking about a very small user base. We had like 10,000 clients at that point. They were using the camera for something else than what they were built for. So that's where Vosker came from. This is when we knew we had to start a new business with a branding that was not related to what it was, and that was much more vertical and agnostic, being able to basically supply the need that the client had. And that need was very simple. Typically, for a camera to work, you have to have access to an internet connection, either a wired connection or a Wi-Fi connection. And then you have to have access to electricity for that matter. Otherwise, it won't connect, it won't transmit anything. Our cameras, it works where you don't have these two conditions because we are connecting through the cellular network, and our camera are working on a battery powered with a solar panel onto it. So basically, they work where all the other cameras don't work. And when we were starting first to basically try to identify what was like the TAM, the sort of total addressable market of that specific opportunity, we were unsure yet of like, is there really a market, or is there just like a couple of people are tweaking our device and using it for different purposes? And we really stumbled across something that we didn't expect to stumble, which was that there are a lot of places where you don't have access to a Wi-Fi or an electricity a power source, and these places are like, for example, on a farmland or a ranch. For example, you want to connect, you want to see the end of your land. Well, wiring down a wire up from your home to that specific, like 40 acres away, it's going to cost you thousands of dollars, and you won't do it. And it's the same thing, for example, when you are on a construction site. So when something is being built, you don't have access to electricity, and you don't have access to the Wi-Fi. It hasn't yet been installed. So, but you still want to monitor, are are my employees working? Did my supplier ship something and we weren't there? Is somebody stealing your stuff? And basically, those market are the ones that we are deploying our technology today. And every time we explain that our solution exists, we see, or we when we talk to client and customer, that they basically tell us like, oh, I have these places that I would like to monitor that we didn't even thought could exist, like water tank management. We've got a bunch of people who are using our camera in South USA to monitor water tank level, so they don't have to go on site, and then they know if there's enough water to supply for their crop, or whatever they're monitoring. So that's how the idea came in, and that's the reason why we founded Vosker on that premise in 2018, to supply the need for that market.
Yeah, I love this story. It's such a quintessential kind of like startup story where you start down one path, and then with technology, with software, you come up with a whole new use case for your product. I remember David that put us in contact from Boreal was explaining the stories. Like I can imagine the day that you guys connected everything. You flip the switch, then you start seeing your cameras like in downtown Manhattan. You're like, that where's there's no deer. Right, so going back to this like insight of like, hey, the data we're collecting can be super powerful. And I think one more business lesson I think that you hit upon, Danny, was this notion of addressable market. Of I find it's a very traditional kind of measure of a business, and particularly ones that are much more mature, that are more, let's say, maturity decline phase. But in a younger company, particularly one that's powered by, yes, I'm going to use the word innovation, but technically, yes, you guys are innovating with your
Yeah.
software. The use cases then are almost unlimited. So how do you predict then, like you said, well, all the different types of people that will see and benefit from the value you're creating?
Well, that's a great question, because of course when you explain the solution, like I've mentioned, people are like, I could use it there, I could use it at this spot, or I could use it at my cabin, or my warehouse, my marina, and all of a sudden, like you become kind of overwhelmed by all the opportunities. So you have to take a step back and basically say like, it's a business I'm running. So what am I going to do with my business to generate what the business is supposed to generate in order to grow? So profitability, growth, cash, liquidity, and basically keep the wheel going on. And we had to make choices. And those choices were made on the assumption that like, we thought about those market and all these potential market, and we tried, of course we're going to address each one of them like in the next 10 years, but like the main point I want to make is that you have to focus on something that's gonna bring more value quicker, so the low hanging fruit. And that's where we really started, and this is why our marketing today is still highly focused onto like wildlife monitoring, farming, ag tech, and construction site. This is where we're focusing, even though there's like plenty of other opportunity where we could spend marketing dollars. But yet, what's important for us is that, just like we've done in the wildlife monitoring sector, we've identified what the user wants through the data that we're collecting and through what they're telling us. And once we know that, we are supplying them tools to optimize their hunting, for example. And we are trying to do the same in farming or in construction site monitoring. So nowadays you can monitor a job site, which means that you can see if is there an employee not wearing its helmet, for example. And now that we know that we can see that, we can identify, is there somebody not wearing something? Do you want to be alerted if somebody's not wearing its helmet? Because there's a lot of accident in the construction sector, and sometimes it's really a small accident that it could have been prevented just by doing the right step, but sometimes the people are working and they don't see that it could be dangerous, so they're doing it anyway. And we're trying to really optimize the use case or the usage of our camera through seeing what the user is doing and then push out new tools for them. So that's always the next phase. First, you enter a market, then you understand the need, then you ask the client what they want, and then we try to optimize their way of living or their way of using the product, and then we get benefit from that. So everything is always about focus, 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 focus.
Yeah, I think you shared a few good, insights there too, Danny, about one software, how you can use it to improve the product, which is not always the case, right? If you're buying a physical good, it's that's not connected. Well, then you don't have a customer relationship, and then B, there's no way for you to get in a readily available fashion, like real time customer feedback. So you guys are using that, and then I think we'll talk about your hyper growth, but making choices, right, and trade-offs of, okay, we're growing so quickly, right, on like I believe the last number you guys shared publicly was like $200 million run rate. Well, you have to make trade-offs. You can't build every single use case, and you have to be kind of hyper focused as to the markets that you're going after, right? So maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like those are two approaches that you guys have focused on.
No, I think you're totally right, and this is what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, so let's talk about that growth. So it's like, I believe first year you launched, the number you mentioned was like 15 million, now up to 200. So, what, like, I guess the classic question is like, well, did you expect this growth? I imagine no, but is there any secrets or lessons behind this hyper growth? Is it just this notion of like product market fit, building something that unlocked value that previously wasn't there?
Well, I was laughing, and it's just because like look, there's so many lessons. I'm not sure exactly which one are the best or the fittest to share here, but like I'm trying to highlight some of those. So to answer the first question, of course we planned for growth. We wanted growth. We all want that, and we want to push and dominate. We're like we are highly competitive people, and I'm not talking only about myself and my two other co-founder. I'm talking about like the team, our employees. Like you should see them. Like everybody wants to dominate, and that's the one of the strengths of our many strengths of our teams, and what we're doing is basically trying to like growing or growth is basically like you have this map of like, all right, you're trying to go north, okay, and you're trying to basically, I'm going to go from point A to point B, and somehow you reach a point Z much more quickly than you expected, but sometimes you had to do sacrifice, and sometimes that meant that you didn't like the way forward didn't go as planned. And I think for us it's been that it's not it hasn't been an easy ride. It's been a fun ride, but like from everybody outside it, like, wow, this is great, all that growth. From everybody inside, you really have to be built of something different to work with us and at various levels. And I'm talking about all the things that are not going to go as planned. And you have to be like our culture, like you have to be able to manage like the chaos that you're self-generating through growth. So yes, it's product market fit, but then after the product market fit, like there's all this marketing and sales team that needs to pick up the phone and start dialing and get more customer. And then there's this marketing team that just constantly asking question to client and trying to really like deeply understand what is it you want with your device. And I think we've been very good at this, and that's the reason why we've grown so fast. So at a certain level, yeah, product market fit and right timing, because like if we would have come up with our cameras 15 years ago when nobody had a cell phone in his hand, like the project would not have took off, and we would not be there to talk about it anyways. So it was about timing. So we were lucky, but when you're lucky, you have to push your luck to the next level.
You have to take take advantage of your advantage, right? Because you guys obviously had the market fit, but then you need to build the company and culture around it. So maybe let's dive in and double click on the culture piece, right? We were talking about before recording, where I'm like, I was really impressed with you, like your LinkedIn page. I'm like, you guys have like really great corporate videos and like really focused on employer brand. And you mentioned this notion of drive and competition of your team. So maybe at a high level, walk us through how you guys have thought, your team have thought about building the organization, and in terms of again going back to scaling very quickly, but maintaining again that culture of which seems like a hustle, grow quick culture, but at the same time, focus seems to have core values as well attached. I'd like to hear you a little bit more.
Yeah, so like first, of course, we have had thought about the culture, but like what I think we're doing differently than other business is that the culture really came from the people. So we were lucky enough, I can say that way, to hire the right people who had this sort of mindset of like outgrow and not only it's not only about growth, it's about like ethics, and I'm talking work ethic, and I'm also talking about like the ethic of how you treat your people, diversity, the way you manage your whole ecosystem of employees, and for us, everybody's some sort of a partner in that story, and every time we're here, like every day I'm at the office, I'm wearing this little polo shirt, and even though I'm not at the office and I'm meeting bankers or lawyers or I'm still wearing that little polo shirt. And the point is that we're all in this together. It's a common fight, and that common fight we're all there to win. And it really started not from the founders. Of course, we're some sort of embodying those value, each one of us, either Jimmy or Jan. But like at some point, like the other leader in our businesses. So I'm talking about the executive, the management, but also we have employees at various level that are leader of the pack, and just like they don't have a management position, but they know they are working for something that is out of the ordinary. Working at Vosker or at any other tech company that's growing as fast and that is changing the world in so many different ways, like you have to be in that sort of mindset that like you want to accomplish something and you feel like there you like embody it with a mission. Somebody has given you a mission to change the world, and those leader inside our business are the one really casting and channeling that culture. And every time we do like all those businesses, we do like everyone, like we're having dinners, parties, and all these stuff, but like either you come at a party or you come at work on a Monday, the same sort of culture and the same sort of like value resonate. And it's culture, it's not just about like what you write on the wall and like how many times you email your employee with a good email about like, here's a good working condition we do have. It's not about that. So about our LinkedIn, for example, that idea, it actually came from some of our employees, and then they made participate each one of the, like we call them the groundbreaker. So they made some employees participate into that, which then led to other people wanting to participate, and then everybody's previous, well, or prior to the fact that we shared them on the social media, people have saw them internally and they were like, wow, this is great. Like I'm learning who that person is and what he or she is doing inside of the business. And like, just like me, like with COVID, like you don't see that much people in the office now instead of like 2 years ago. So those sort of things that came from the employee, came from our leaders internally, we are putting it online, but it is really a tool that we're using for ourselves for real, and then we're putting it online. So it works for us as an employer brand, as a way for us to promote, of course, but I think it works not only to promote our brands, but to promote internally the message that like we are here to dominate. Like, and how do we do that?
Yeah, I love how you think about culture, because culture exists whether you want it or not. So you guys seem to be very intentional about the creating of it. And we're talking also before about transparency. You guys have this very transparent approach. There's pros and cons, but I'd like to hear more on the pros. So like, what's been the benefit of this open sharing, being very open, candid with the team? I think it works well, obviously, in high performance cultures because, like you said, hustle, work ethic. So performance needs to follow, and so having this, I guess, transparency about performance results also, I imagine, is a positive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positive. There are some negative to it, but I think like the benefits outweigh like those negative impact. And one of them is like we are like from the core, and from Jan's perspective. Jan is the CEO and my brother is the president. Both of them and myself, I think we are very authentic people. If you ask us something, we're gonna tell you the truth. No matter how hard the truth may be to hear, it's gonna be the truth. And then once you know the truth, you can do something about that. And I think a lot of people inside of our business are in that model or are built that way. I think when you work in a certain manner, sometimes you pull talent or people that are similar to you. And I think this is some sort of value that we put forward very highly. One of an example of how we live that through our business is that every month or so now we have this call where we call, well, basically everybody is invited, so all the employees are invited. We do it in English and in French because we do have a lot of both language speaking employees. And the point is like, ask us anything. And then there's like, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's my brother, sometimes it's Jan, the CEO, sometimes it's our executive team. And anybody from any places in the business can ask us anything, right? And sometimes question may sound crazy, like wow, I'm not even sure how to respond to that. And there's 150 people listening to you, and like, well, that's going to be a tough one. But I think like it shows that you're not only, yes, you're an entrepreneur and yes, you're a leader and you want to develop the business, but at the end it shows that you're transparent and that you're all living through something together. And so that I think brings a lot of value. The downside of that authenticity is the fact that sometimes like people can be hurt by like taking a look at the truth. It's much more easier to lie to yourself or to lie to your number, and to basically take the number and say, these were the reason why I didn't achieve my number, than to basically and face the truth and act on it. So I think that's an important fact. But like, even though there's a downside, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say like, look, I failed, or our team failed miserably on that. How do we stand up and move forward? I think that offset the negative impact of that you failed.
Yeah, going back to your point about how it out, the pros outweigh the cons in this case, right? Where it's like, hey, when there's an issue, a failure, a misstep, well, we're transparent, we're open, we don't try and hide it under the rug. Danny, have you thought about like a more longer term vision? Like, because obviously you guys are still in growth mode, but if you zoom out and think, I'm like, hey, where do you want to take this company in the next, let's say, 3, 5, 10 years? Is there like a more broader vision defined, be it like, let's say, going public or selling to a bigger company? Or is it because you're such in a growth mode? There's still so many use cases to uncover that it's maybe precocious to talk about like a longer term vision.
I think there's a lot of question in that question. So I'm going to try to parcel it down and basically answer it as best as I can. And if there's something I missed, feel free to ask again. So the vision. So 3 to 5 years for us, it's already the way where we are already every day thinking about 3 to 5 years from now. Otherwise, we would not be investing as much into our ecosystem, into building our customer brand awareness or building the employer brand. So we're always thinking 2 to 3 years forward. Now, I think what is important to understand is that our business, like at core, what we are, it's a connectivity platform. We're connecting people and enabling them to see the world in various ways. If you think about the world today, and you may think like just 20 years ago versus now, you may think that nowadays we are highly connected and that there's a lot of devices and all this IoT and all this Internet of Things or metadata that we're seeing. Like, it's crazy how much connected we are. But the honest truth is that you should see the world of tomorrow. The world of tomorrow, like 20 years from now, there's gonna be like 10, if not 100x the level of connectivity than we do have today. So our path to growth and our path at looking at the future is that we want to be a really big player in that connectivity subset. So of course, if we want to be the dream company that we envision we can be, well, you have to plan it in advance. And by planning, I mean that not only to plan it like on the number and the sales that you want to make, but that plan needs the right level of financing. And sometimes, specifically with growth businesses, like where shit can really hit the fan. And sorry to say that, say that this way, but like when it can really go wrong, it's when there's a liquidity issue, because there's a lot of great businesses that get to a point where they didn't manage their liquidity nicely or smoothly enough to be able to make it to the next level. And so I'm not. I strongly believe that we've done greatly so far, and that we will do so in the future. But like we have to make a plan. And so you ask if we are at some point going to consider to go public. This is something that we've considered. This, as of today, we've prepared ourselves, and we're trying internally to manage ourselves just like if we were a public company. So it's like this rule of practice and then play. So if at some point we choose to go, we can go and be ready for those market. And I'm not saying that it's not a dream either from Jan or Jimmy or myself to basically go public. It's not a dream. Like what we're dreaming about is being the next, like the next big thing. Like that's what we're dreaming about. Now the how to, there are plentiful. Now until now, so from the beginning of the business up until that very specific moment, there has been only one investment, even though we've reached 200 million in revenue. And so we still have a pretty good amount of the share of the business. And for us, that significant amount of shares enabled us to basically retain a lot of control and make sure that the plan will be executed throughout all those years. And so the choice of how we're going to finance ourselves is still ahead of us. But there's a lot of money in the private sector. There's a lot of investor, and sometime in the private sector, you can think a bit longer than when you're public and you have to deliver for the next quarter. And for us, for now, where we are at, I think the right thing to do is to think long term, because even though we've grown fast, and I think we've got great result and pretty amazing recurring revenue, I'm pretty sure that we can 10x our business very quickly in the next couple of years. But the way to do it requires that we think long term, that we take this position of like, it doesn't matter if this day today it doesn't seem profitable right now. We are looking for long term profitability and long term growth.
Yeah, that's a great answer. So yeah, thanks for answering my scattered question. So I find there's a few key parts I want to dissect. So you mentioned this, always thinking and operating with 3 to 5 years out. I think is great because you don't have necessarily that pressure. And I think one thing else you mentioned is recurring revenue, right? We didn't speak about your business model, but you sell the camera up front, but then you also provide a monthly recurring fee for access to the data, etc. Which great business model, because then I'm not sure if you're selling your cameras at cost or not, but allows you basically to have a SaaS-like business where you can really heavily invest upfront and then recover, obviously, all the cash flow in the future, right? So I think it makes for great quality revenue of a company, which I think just irrespective of being public or private, just a great business to have and own.
Yep. Yeah. It's easier to forecast forward when you know how much recurring revenue is going to come out this year, when you know all your metrics. And that's we can spend some time there. Like, it's not everybody who comes into business that know what is it that you have to measure and what are the KPIs that investors are going to take a look at to basically not only value your business, but like see the value of the future. And like those metrics, like the lifetime value of the client, your customer acquisition cost, your churn, and all these stuff, were things we did not even know about like 5 years ago. Okay, to be totally honest, we learned it through, well, taking the right advisor in, getting the right people inside of our business. And now we're measuring these stuff, and that we are able to basically, hey, it cost me X amount of money to get a client, and I'm getting Y amount of money in the future for that client. So it's like an ATM. Like you just you inject money, and it's gonna more money is gonna come out. But it's, you have to know those metrics, and you have to have them in a pretty well defined and exempt of any mistakes or error or things that will influence like the righteousness of those KPIs. And I think we've developed these KPIs very quickly in the last couple of years. And now we are able to see and know. And when I'm talking about investing for the future, that's the reason why I'm taking this stand. It's because we know how to, and well, how much a client's going to bring back to the ecosystem and how much value we can provide to the client during that lifetime value.
Yeah. So if you put your shareholder hat on for a second, it's like, you're sitting on obviously a great company with a great culture with long-term prospects. So it's like, yeah, there's no limit to the upside going back to your 10x. I'd like to maybe ask a few personal questions, right? You mentioned like, you started this with your brother. You have your co-founder Jan as well. Any lessons along this personal journey? It's not the first company you start, but it definitely seems that you guys have have hit this like next level stride with Vosker. So
Yep.
like you're still in it. It feels like maybe still early, like first or second inning. But any thoughts of perspective or introspection on the journey so far?
Yeah, well, on that point, I think it's a pretty good question, and I would say something like, today people know about all this success, and I would call it our success, speaking from the whole team, so not only the founders but also our employees. And the cool thing is that we failed many times prior to that moment, and so in such a way that we've learned so much that now we know how to succeed. Okay, and I'm not saying that we're not going to fail in the process of succeeding anymore. I think there's going to be an amount of and a certain number of failure looking forward in front of us. There certainly is going to be some hurdle and some difficulty, but like those difficulty in the past have made us who we are today. And I think that that would be one advice that I would share with anyone. Like at some point, you're gonna fail, or there's gonna be something, and someone's gonna tell you no, and it's gonna sadden you to the deep level of your heart, and sometimes it gets emotional, like because you're believing so much in what you're doing. Then when you get those no's, you're like, wow, I really thought I had it this time, and it hurts. It truly hurts, and it still hurts me today. Like when something happened like that, it hurts. But like you just have to remember that like if you can live to fight another day, then the other day is another day. Like you can just keep pushing forward. So I think that is something that embodies the three of us as founder. We came from humble beginnings, the three of us. I think we faced a lot of challenge when we were young, and we did start a lot of potential business. Some were successful, not known as Vosker, not as known as Vosker, but and others were less successful. But like we've learned a lot of stuff during those years, and I think they are helpful today.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That doesn't, that bears. It's worth repeating this notion of you learn much more from mistakes than from successes. Successes are great, but sometimes there's a lot of extraneous variables that come into like why a particular company or initiative succeeded. But the failure hurts, so it's like that's the one you probably want to dissect more. And going back to your polo, you have your brand, like right on your chest, probably wearing it, and like if something goes wrong, it's like it's still a personal figure to a certain extent, right? It's tied up to your identity. So it's hard to be like, this is professional me. This is like, the Danny at home that's more chill. It's the same person. So it's like, it still hurts just as much, I find.
I think you're right on this. You're right, and that's the reason why the authenticity value that we were talking just prior to that moment is highly important. Like you need to be able to face the truth, however ugly and unsatisfying the truth is. Like the truth is always the truth, and once you've mastered that capacity of looking at yourself in the mirror and telling you like, look, you fucked up, and it's okay. Now, what is it you're gonna do about it? And that's important. And I think it's pretty humbling. But like when like the saddest thing about people who have success is the one that like they seem to have success now, but they haven't failed enough to get there. So at some point they're gonna fail. It's gonna very hurt a lot more, and it's gonna be harder for them to get back from it. So I think that part is important.
Yeah, you mentioned this notion of measurement and learning, and like so. Selfishly, I want to ask you a few lessons on like what you've learned so far. Some of the metrics, like you're in charge of growth. You know, that's the hat you're wearing. I imagine you speak to a lot of other entrepreneurs. You mentioned, you know, getting advice from other like SaaS like companies. What's the playbook that you guys have built in terms of like growth? Like from let's say if you walk us through like the traditional, let's say sales funnel from like lead to the close to the retention, how do you think about the playbook for Vosker?
Well, there's two things I think are important here. So, how do we grow personally, and what do we learn? And I think that has been an important driver of what we are doing inside of the business. So, I'm first going to start with this one. So, like being a young entrepreneur, and like you always feel young because there's always something who has done a lot more things than you've done in the past couple of years, or in all their career are a lot better than yours in so many ways. And so you have to learn from those people. So what we are doing, I think, in a pretty good manner is that every time we meet someone, a new person, and I'm going to do it at the end of this interview, by the way, we always ask those people the same exact question in the same order. And the question is, who do you think I should talk to next? Like, who do you think that if I connect with, for whatever the reason, is going to bring us to think differently, to learn something else, or to see the world in a different way? And that's important because, like, learning is the very basic of you getting to where you want to go in life. I will, and I honestly wish I will always be learning something else every day of my life, because it's making me a better person and a better version of myself. And at some point, while we were picking up the phone and trying to reach that next connection, like the one that could make the difference, we came into contact with various individuals from various walk of life, successful and unsuccessful, or in the coming of being successful, and they were sharing with us what they felt was important in order to succeed in their own industry. And some guy shared with me something that was very important a few years ago, and I want to state it before explaining what we do at Vosker to grow. But like, he told me, Danny, and like the first thing is that we were having this discussion, him and I was like, wow, everything you've done in your life seems to be in billions of dollars. Like it was only B, like the only letter that seemed to appear in all his resume, and everything he's done was in billions. And I was like, how do you do that? How do you do that? How is it that everything you've done was there? And he told us something, because I was not the only one at the meeting. He told us, like, Danny, you have to choose the right league to play into. And I think, even though it may seem very easy to choose the right league, you have to ask yourself first, what is it you want to do with your life in order to know in what league you want to play? And what league you want to play doesn't only concern you as an individual, it also concerns your business. It concerns your product. Like, we live in a league where we obviously want to be a lot better than our competitor in terms of a product market fit. We live in a league where we want to be a lot more better financed than our competitors, so that we can take advantage of the right timing. We want to have that level in the league, or in a certain point where we are the best at delivering a connectivity platform, so much so that we should deserve to be playing in the next league. Like that. That's always the thinking. Okay, so when you take all that and you bring back this information to how do you strategize, and how do you grow, and how do you attack different market opportunities, what we do is always about those sort of line. So before entering a new market, we do, like any other businesses, we do some sort of like market research, say, hey, will our product work there? Like, And that's an important part. Like, and that process, we've done it for every state in the US. Okay. So, for example, you take, and I'm going to take one example that has happened very recently. We wanted to take our cameras, which are used on the construction site, typically in North America, and bring that in Europe, in various countries in Europe. And so those camera, they're using, well, the user of those camera on the construction site, and also for the farming. I think that's once again another example that are very highly connected there. So we are looking at getting into France. So basically, we have a team like that are working under my supervision, and what we do is that we grab as much information as we can on the market first. So we wanted to go into France, so we take a look as like, is there any construction in France? It's like, oh yeah, we can tick the box, okay. And then, is there any farming happening there? And say, yes, 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 we take the box. But like the next subset of question is like to map out what would be the channel of distribution and who's the real end client, and does our product really works there for various reasons. So yeah, it's a camera, it's connecting to cellular network, it's going to connect there. But like the use case, like every one of our marketing flyers or images in the US, you've got those picture of like a guy with a pickup, like in a very big truck, like a Ford F-150, and like, wow, like that's the guy, construction site. Oh, I'm like, and I said Ford F-150, but like there's a lot of other sort of trucks that are being used. But my point is that in France, nobody used those sort of trucks. Like it's in a very American way of doing stuff. Like if they were using a F-150 in downtown Paris, it will be tough to move around, even though you want to go on a construction site. And the same thing is true for like, we wanted to sell in the farming industry, but like in France, I don't know if you know that, but like there's a lot of winery and people who are like cultivating like grapefruit, which we have no clue of like what the farmer want to monitor there, instead of like crop monitoring what we are doing here. And all our packaging, we wanted to sell without modifying it because it felt easy. You always want to go at the low hanging fruit first, but it wasn't that easy. If we were going to sell that, the client has to be able to recognize itself as like, wow, this is me on the box. I'm going to buy it and then I'm going to deploy it. But like we had to repackage all this. So what we do when we enter a new market is we take a little research. We experimentally test like, will our product work with that market? And then once those tests are done and we see, is there really a market? Is there a market fit for our product? Is there a dollar related that market fit, and how much is it going to cost to you? We start with a very, like, I call it the SWAT team. Like this, they really start in that market, the online process, all the warehousing process, the first consumer or customer base that are going to sell a process. And they start, the SWAT implement that. They're the commandos of that specific place. They're the one you can drop in the jungle with like a little knife and like we're gonna see you back in 6 months, and we hope you build the village. And this is exactly the sort of themes that we're deploying there. Once this is done, and that like the village is built, or like the foundation for our growth in that specific area, either a states or a region, for example in Europe. Once this is done, we get back and we bring that specific thing that we're doing to the revenue team, who then are gonna operationalize it and structure it in various ways. But it's always the same things we do in the same sort of order, and every little box needs to be ticked and answered before us launching to some places, so we don't spend money and time into an unfocused manner. So the reason why we've grown so fast is that we've been able to take a process and copy paste it every time. And that process, every time you do it, you've noticed that like something could be like improve or modify in order to be better. So we've done that at every copy paste. And nowadays, when we're copy pasting, we're doing it very quickly. And that's the reason why we've been able to grow faster. And we try to do that in every subset of our business.
Yeah, it sounds like a loop as well, where you're feeding into information. Like you said, you're improving the process as you're going, and then customizing it also, like you said, to a local level, right? Like the Ford F-150 example thing is great. Yeah, like with the Paris, there's no pickup trucks, right? You need to be able to speak to that market. Um, You mentioned both types of growth. So I want to go back. You mentioned about this personal growth, and then finding new connections, people that are maybe at a higher plateau. I don't know if you can share the story of how you guys connected with Stefan from Garda World. That was recently, I think, publicly invested $60 million into
Yep.
Vosker. Is it using your playbook of like, hey, I want to reach these people. I'm curious to hear the story.
Well, it's exactly like that. And well, the fun fact is sometimes when you make noise in your industry, people hear about it. And we've had, just like you've mentioned, we came out of like all of a sudden we were a small company, and then somehow we started doing marketing, and this copy pasting thing, and now a lot more people know about us, where we are from and what we do. And while we were doing this, and I'm talking about the we, because I was certainly not alone delivering that. We still have like I think it's 28 to 380 employees nowadays or something like that are delivering that message to the whole market. So that's always helpful. And while we were doing this, we were picking up the phone and say talking to all these people. And one thing that I wanted to do is basically talk to people who had success and that had built multi-billion dollar type of company. And I'm not talking just about market cap, because nowadays you've got all these tech companies that are worth billions but not generating a penny. So what I was really aiming at, like the one that built real business. And maybe I'm gonna face some criticism over that, because there are real businesses that are not generating money. But like, yeah, when you put those aside, there are other businesses that have grown, and to a certain extent, with always in mind like growth, profitability, and liquidity. And Stefan was one of those guys. And so when you pick up the phone and you start to talk to one executive, that leads to another, that leads to a banker, that leads to a lawyer, that leads to another banker who knows Stefan. And at some point, the people answer like, I think you should talk to him. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'd really like to talk to him. Like, if you can intro us, it'd be great. And it's when you're asking for those intro, like the second part of like asking is that you have to give back. Okay. And that's the point. So when I ask something of somebody, I'm always glad to give back something else in return. And sometimes at that specific point, when you're just starting your own life, you have nothing you can share of that really is going to bring any value to the person in front of you. Like, for example, Stefan, like, what is it that I could bring value to him in any ways? Like, the guy is already a multi-billionaire with all that success in business. Like, but at some point, we still told him like, look, if we can do something, please let us know. And we were able to pay back sometime a couple of years later, or sometime a couple of weeks later. So we've met Stefan through that channel of basically picking up the phone and starting to ask and talk to people. But we've met several other successful multi-billionaire and multi-billion-dollar operative and executive from various sector. And once you have 1 hour to ask them, like, please tell me what's the world you're living in, and explain to me how you got there. Sometimes you have to take a look at like, and basically listen what they're telling you. And like, once you get back, you have to modify so much thing you're doing in your life that you're always wondering your question, like, wow, like this is going to be taking like a lot more time than I expected. But at least once again, you know the truth. So once you face it, it's easier to move on.
Yeah, I love that lesson. It's like, hey, to be successful, it's not this, lottery ticket that you get and it's ordained. It's a lot of fucking hard work. It takes many, many
Yeah.
years, sometimes toiling away in obscurity, and with no guaranteed outcome that it's going to work.
No.
So, I think that's a very good point that you mentioned. Is like, oh, once you realize that, hey, the people that made it to the other side, they share some lessons. It's like, hey, by the way, you're going to have to up level your game, and it's going to be painful and it's going to take time, but it's one of, like, of just constant learning, right? So I think that's a fantastic story, Danny. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks. And honestly, like, there's a price to pay for success. I'm not talking about a monetary price. Of course, there is one, but like all the things that you're going to have to put aside to be successful, not only on yourself, but as a business. And when I'm talking about focusing, I'm talking like on the business side, but also on the personal side. Like you can read a book, or you can go out there and do some party. Like it's your choice. Like, but at the end, at some point, if you fast track that 10 years, like your choice and the discipline that you will apply to your choice will make you who you will be in the future. So discipline for us, once again, that's one of the key metric to measure in any individual if you want to see if they're going to be successful. Like the discipline is going to take care of you like a mom with its little baby. Like it sure is going to grow. But it's hard to be disciplined when, just like you've mentioned, sometimes it gets hard, and very, very hard, like emotionally, financially, stressfully, family wise as well. Like because you want to be that great entrepreneur, that great partner for all your clients. You want to deliver a great product. You also want to be a great friend, a great father, a great boyfriend or husband, and all that comes together, and you try to live to your best life. But like it's not easy. You cannot be perfect. At first, you cannot be perfect in anywhere. You can always look for greatness and try to perfectionize yourself and be better. But at some point, you cannot be perfect. Neither can you be perfect in every one of those things. So you won't be a perfect father, neither won't you be a perfect entrepreneur, neither won't you be a good leader at all time. And it and as funny as it may seem, it's okay to cry sometime. It's okay to cry. It does happen. You have to take a look at yourself and be able to live out this emotion before letting it go and moving forward. But like if it that thing of like not crying and not feeling your emotion, that's way in the past. But still, people believe that like, oh, he's a leader. He's never he's not crying. Like he's a tough guy. He's gonna do it. But like look, we're human. We're just trying to be superhuman. But like this doesn't exist. So between those things, you're just a human trying to be the part of yourself, and it gets hard.
Danny, I can't think of a better way of closing off this episode. What a great quote! Like I love this notion of discipline you mentioned. Made me think of Jocko Willink with discipline equals freedom, where it's like, well, if you want to have what you want in life, you have to have this certain discipline, right? Which means you end up being free. But so I love that philosophy that you bring to bear, Danny. So like, I guess the only thing I'd say is continued success. It's a pleasure, obviously having met you and chatting. Final question is, where can people learn, connect, and learn more about Vosker and your journey?
Yeah, well, always our website is always the first, I think, best place to know what we're doing and what is it that we could do for you, not only on the customer side but also on the employee side. If you want to join a great business with that's changing the world one camera at a time, then you can join us. Like, and you can go on our website. And if just like I've done in the past, some of you want to pick up the phone or write me a little chat and say, hey, I'd like to chat or I'd like to learn from you. And like, don't take it personally. I do have a lot of, I don't have that much time on my schedule, but I'll always do the best that I can to basically point out the people in the right direction and try to use my time to benefit to other, even though because at some point somebody gave me that time, and so now I'm in that position of like I can somehow give a bit back because I still have a lot to learn. So I cannot give everything back. I've yet to learn those things, but they can reach me on LinkedIn. It'd be my pleasure if somebody wants a quick connect and an email. It's always appreciated, but don't spam me. That's too much.
Yeah, it's never too early to pay it forward. So yeah, Danny, thanks so much, and I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, same as well. Thank you for bringing us online, and thank you for having Vosker as a company on your podcast.
All the best.